Happy New Now, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with you as always. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. While listening, you'll be exposed to inspiring, empowering, and unifying perspectives that I'm highly confident will yield stellar results in your life if you opt to try them on for size. Also, I'm super happy to announce that we have officially launched our new late-night style, consciousness-elevating video variety talk show, Optimistic, which features live visionary artists, soul share interviews, retreat guests that come here to the Mystic Manor to join me and the interviewee on the stage during the last night of their stay, their week-long stay, as well as the show concluding with live musical performances. We're going to be releasing episodes every other Sunday at 11:11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and you can go to optimistic.tv, that's spelled OPTIMYSTIC.tv, to join our watch party for each future episode's release or to check out past episodes. We were originally going to be releasing Optimistic episodes every Sunday. However, as a community, following the flow of what is wanting to come through in these unique and unprecedented times with so many of our soul family stuck at home, craving connection, we have decided to move to releasing episodes every other Sunday so that those of us here on the production team at the Mystic Manor can free up some time and energy to help create virtual community for all of you P heads out there. And we are accomplishing that aim by launching our new Mystic Manor online retreat and play shops re-membership program. It's going to entail live play shops twice daily, 7 days a week, behind the scenes footage here at the Mystic Manor each day, access to a Facebook group where we do short interactive 1-minute video challenges and reflect back to each other about our experiences, live Q&As with me and some of the other facilitators, and more. It's a super robust program. It's facilitated by over a dozen of us here at the Mystic Manor, and in an effort to support all you P heads out there stuck at home craving connection, for a limited time, it is going to be totally free to sign up on our Patreon page, which is linked at optimistic.tv. Just be sure to fill out the form link that's located at the top of our About section on Patreon so we can make sure you have access. Otherwise, we're super excited to have you join in all the magic with us that's happening here every single day at the Mystic Manor and to expand our community together. Here we grow. All right, all you positive heads, welcome. So happy to have you all back with me as always. And today I have a guest here, a special guest, Soul Share Tag Team, another podcaster, longtime P-head, Adam Nix from the Wayfinder podcast. Adam, how are you, my friend?
Doing great, brother. How you doing out there in Cali?
Just quarantining away out here. We used to call this a Mystic Manor. Now we call it the Quarantine Castle. So, you gotta win in Rome, right?
I love it, man. Yeah, we're out here in Texas celebrating the Coronapalooza 2020 lockdown extravaganza. So nice. I'm right there with you, man.
Beautiful.
Make the best of it.
Beautiful. They make the coronavirus bigger in Texas, right?
Everything's bigger here, man.
Right. Well, man, it's so good to do this. And, my idea for this soul share is to, the fact that you have an epic podcast as well. And you and I connected, within the last year sometime.
In the last 6 months, sometime like that.
Yeah.
Right around whenever you were first kicking off Optimistic, which congratulations on the release of that, by the way. That just kicked off middle of March, man. Good job.
Yeah. It's been quite the birthing process to get Optimistic out to the world. And it's been super cool to see it go from concept years ago to, okay, we're doing this, to starting to record.
Literally 9 months. Pandemic.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We released
Giving birth in the midst of a pandemic.
episode 1 of Optimistic came out on March 15th, which, by the way, you can go to optimistic.tv if you want to see it. It's a late night style variety show, live music, live visionary art, soul share interviews, retreat guests that are part of it. And anyway, so the day we released episode 1 with Shaman Durek, same day we get announced that here in LA that we're doing a full lockdown, all bars closing and all of that. And like, okay, I got to be careful with this manifestation thing. I've been saying for years, making the comparison that I feel like I represent a good virus in the world, right? And so an optimistic is going to be the next, proliferation of getting that virus spread to the world. And the day it comes out, it's like, okay, the coronavirus got us locked down. It's like yin and yang. So I got to be careful what
Brother, have you ever heard the term be impeccable with your word and choose your words carefully? You gotta knock that crap off.
Ooh, I know.
Next thing you're going to be telling me that you were praying for a captive audience for the release of Optimistic.
I was honestly, Adam, I was praying for more of a captive audience. I mean, it's come out, and obviously many things people are people, so many things vying for our time, right? And I just it's one of those things I would love to get the opportunity for it to be seen. It's almost like starting from scratch, with the Positive Head podcast. Been at this for, almost 5 years, and, have reached a pretty broad audience. I'm very pleased with that. It's, aside from me and my mother, there's been a few other people that have listened to it. 10 million, we're north of 10 million downloads now. And, awesome. So I really was like, okay, we're going to start off, just as big as any podcast episode. And it's like, oh, this is a new show on a new platform in video, not audio. And so, it's been like, in a sense, starting from scratch, although obviously I started with some leg up having the podcast audience. But I also think some people, it's a little challenging for them because people get really used to what they're used to. So when the first ever negative iTunes reviews I ever got was when I started talking about Optimistic, and, people are like, oh, this, Positive Head, he talks too much about Optimistic now. And, people get so used to what they're used to, and change is something that, people don't always want. And I brought in a co-host, Dr. Erica Middlemiss, to help. And because I can do anything, I can't do everything. And it's a lot of bandwidth. Yeah, she's wonderful. So wonderful. So it's been a learning curve in many ways. And, man, I know you get it having, you're about 2 years into, since the birth of Wayfinder.
Yeah, we're a couple of years into Wayfinder now, and it's been an evolution, man. I've watched you grow over the last several years, and I can say from someone who's sat in that seat myself, it's a thing when you're trying to launch a thing and you're trying to speak to people, and trying to get a message out into the hands and the minds and hearts of people, because not everybody has the same minds and hearts, right? And so,
or vision,
everybody
right.
Everybody's got a different vision or a slightly different vision and slightly different modalities for reaching that vision. And, as a broadcaster, podcaster, speaker, teacher, thinker, healer, whatever, you're always trying to reach out to as many people as you can, because that's where your largest area of impact is, obviously.
Yep.
But, there's always going to be dissenters along the way, and then people who really love it. And you just got to be as authentic as you can, like we were talking about earlier, being authentic and trying to.
It's the key to everything.
Yeah. That's it. Because authenticity is magnetic, and the more authentic you are, the more you're going to attract the right people to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So you've done a great job, man. And by the way, anybody who hasn't seen Optimistic or checked out Brandon's late night consciousness elevating show, it's awesome. I was so privileged, Brandon. You invited me and a good friend of mine, Jeff Sullivan, the amazing visionary artist. Yes. We came out to LA to Venice to come do that show with you. Jeff was on the show, and I got to see all the behind the scenes stuff. And man, it's an awesome show. Like, it really, for real, guys, if you're listening to this and you're not listening to Optimistic, if you're hearing this on my show, or if you're hearing this on Positive Head, go listen to Wayfinder and vice versa. But yes. Optimistic is an awesome show. It's a visual masterpiece. The whole thing is beautiful and entrancing. There's a speaker there who's going to be an author, a researcher, a speaker, doctor, whatever.
Yep.
And then you got musicians, and then you have a visual artist there, and the whole place is just overflowing with creativity and with positive energy. So if you're not checking that out, Brandon, where can they find Optimistic again?
You can go to optimistic.tv. That's the easiest place.
Yeah, that's the
And
easiest.
even if you know, and of course it's spelled with a Y, mystic, like mystical, but if you spell it the normal way, it'll get you there anyway. So either spelling will get you to the show page. And yeah, man, it was really cool having you here, actually. And Jeff, what a great guy, what a talented artist, and yeah, he was just on the most recent episode with Matt Kahn, right? He's the visionary artist, and at least the most recently released as of this recording. And yeah, Matt was. That's
a trip.
He's a trip. So you were here when Matt was in house, right?
I spent a lot of time with Matt before and after the show. Yeah.
What an alien that guy is, right?
Yeah, he really is.
Talk about being authentic. Like he's one of my favorite top spiritual teachers on the planet. There's something really special running through. Who just said it the other day? I think my son said. My son Bradley said, "Yeah, he's like the spiritual Jack Black."
Oh my God, that's exactly what he is.
Isn't that good?
That's too funny. Yeah, I love him. Matt's a super guy.
Super cool. Well, let's see, man. Where can we go with this conversation? I mean, I feel like you and I could go down about 11,111 rabbit holes.
Yeah, the internet's going to run out of storage before we run out of shit to talk about.
It's possible that it very well could.
Man, I just said shit. Can I say shit on your podcast?
Yeah, shit. You might as well. Okay. Holy shift. It's a real shift show.
Stop it.
Stop it.
God. I don't know, man. Where do you want to go? We can go anywhere. What are we trying to do here?
What are we trying to do? Well, let's start here. What is the highest excitement for you right now? You're a guy who's, super cerebral, tapped in, intelligent, going down all the wormholes and rabbit holes of, there's so many places once you're on the spiritual path, if you will, that you can go from, quantum physics to, conspiracy to, all of it. And I know you've dabbled and looked in all the, behind all the doors to some degree. What is your highest excitement right now? What are you tripping out
right
on?
Now, man? What I've been excited about more and more is seeing people liberate themselves. Right. So there's this beautiful word in ancient Sanskrit called moksha. More or less, you could spell it M-O-K-S-H-A, but of course it's phonetic because it's not written in our language. But ancient Sanskrit, and it's moksha, and it means liberation. And what it really means in this beautiful, rich language, for anybody that knows that Sanskrit is familiar with it, it's a very rich, beautiful, elegant language. And the word liberation, as used with the definition of moksha, it sort of means to be liberated from a limiting belief or a limiting mindset or a limiting worldview. So when we think of liberation, at least like when I think of liberation, I think of like shackles and chains coming off, right? Being freed from those shackles and chains. What's neat about the word moksha is that it specifically applies to like limiting beliefs and mindsets, because anybody who's ever lived within a limiting worldview, as most of us I think have, certainly I have, that it really does act like a shackle and a chain.
Right.
And so to be released from the bondage of that is moksha. And it's a beautiful thing. And so I've been really meditating on that word and what it means. And especially at this very special, transformative time that we're all sort of moving through together right now with the quarantine thing and all of that. Fear is rampant. Right. And fear is one of the most limiting beliefs or limiting experiences that we can have as human beings. And so I've just been thinking a lot about that, like the steps to moksha, the steps to liberation, the steps to free yourself from fear and from a limiting belief set. And that's really been turning me on, because my biggest passion in life is just seeing light bulbs pop on in the minds of other people. That's it.
Right.
And then using every gift that I can to contribute to that. Right. And I love playing music. I love dancing, exercising, reading, discussing ideas with people. But like the more that I do those things in such a way that they benefit others, like the more that I benefit from that, like the more deeply that I enjoy it and benefit from it. And that's been the neat thing about social media over these last few months is like A lot of people are buying into the fear, but then a lot of them are turning around and they're running into someone who's trying to shine a light on things. And the reality is that we are inhabiting we're sharing this physical reality, but the subjective reality that we cook up in our minds is really the one that we inhabit the most. I mean, 99% of what goes on in our lives goes on in our head. And as you and I are just sitting here, there's no one in the room with me. I'm sort of sitting in these bay windows in my bedroom because I don't have access to my studio right now because it's not at home. But anyway, I'm looking out over my backyard. There's no one in my backyard. I've got a pond and I've got chickens pecking around. But there's nothing in the outside world that is invading my space, that's invading my reality, that's oppressing my ability to do anything. So the only oppressive or repressive or limiting, realities that I could be encountering right now are the ones in my head. Do my neighbors want to come kill me and take my toilet paper? Right? That's
quite likely.
That's quite
50,
likely.
chance.
And there are people walking around living in this space, right? Is the corona disguised as a UPS man banging on my back door right now?
Right.
Is that what's happening?
Right.
And so I guess, the things that are exciting me right now more than ever is being thankful for all the blessings that I have in my life, which are abundant and clear to me at the moment. And they're not always. But then to be able to share joy and excitement and reason for gratitude so that other people can use that to enhance their lives and just help people achieve that moksha by becoming self-aware, identifying the moving components in their lives and going through that whole process of liberation. That's it. Long ass answer, but that's it.
I love it. That's a wonderful answer. Yeah. What's cool about that is I just received an advanced copy of Paul Selig. I imagine you know who Paul is. His channel. He's pretty fascinating guy, channeler, and he has a new book that is coming out called Alchemy. And they sent me the advanced copy, so I think it comes out in a few months. And they send it to people ahead of time to review. That he's supposed to. He actually was supposed to be on Positive Head a while back, and we had to reschedule. So I think he will be on, and hopefully Optimistic as well once the book comes out. But so I just picked it up and started reading it some this morning, and that's how the book starts out. Here he is. He's channeling this. Who knows, I always say about channeling, whether it's true or not, the person claims to be, some, multidimensional, non-physical entity coming through their form and speaking, through their physical vessel. Whether it's true or not, I'm sort of less interested in that and more interested in the information that's coming through. And oftentimes what I find is people that claim to be channeling have absolutely brilliant information coming through them, which leads me to believe what they're claiming, and that is some other entity is speaking through their physical vessel. And so with Paul, this book, the way it starts out is that very topic is, talking about how we so identify with form and the stories of who and what we are when it really has no... It's so such a trick ultimately that if we can release our idea of what it means to be Brandon or Adam or whoever's listening and the identity with that form, it really is so much less important than the truth of the situation that we are this multidimensional being who is just temporarily peering through the vessel. The avatar, the story that is Brandon or Adam or any of you out there listening, and the more that you can liberate yourself from that perspective that this is who I am and this is my story and all of these things, the more we can really get into flow and into tune with living from our most ideal vantage point, and how challenging it can be because we really get attached to this idea of who and what we are and who we've been, and then taking that story and dragging it forward to tomorrow based off of seeing that's what everyone else is doing, that's what we're taught we're supposed to do, this is who I am, this is who my parents are, this is when I was born, when really all of that is sort of inconsequential in comparison to the truth of the situation in which you find yourself. And the more you can detach in a healthy way from these stories about who and what you are, the quicker you can get to experiencing from a vantage point that is much more rewarding, fulfilling, where you traverse challenge points much more gracefully, etc.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. that's releasing that limiting belief that we are really just this cocktail of life experiences and beliefs and conditioning and traumas, right? And all of this
Right.
stuff. Releasing
Right.
that whole story, telling a different story. Joe Dispenza talks about that telling a different story thing. A lot of people talk about that. And I
Yep.
love that. That's it. So, sort of these steps to liberation, people will, I'm sure, reach out to you, and they reach out to me, and they reach out to lots of people. If you have any kind of a platform and you're trying to help people, you get these questions like, what do I do?
Yep.
Like I'm starting to find out some things, and like I don't know what to do with this information. Where do I go next? What books do I read? What videos do I watch? Which speakers do I listen to? And all this kind of stuff. And there's always some supposed process for awakening or for
Mm.
moksha, for this liberation. And it's different for everyone, but it starts with self-awareness. It
Yeah.
starts with becoming aware that you are not your body first and
Yep.
foremost. You're not even your mind. You're not any of the things that you think that you are. You're a bunch of cobbled together beliefs and life experiences and all that stuff on the surface, but that's just surface deep. And you've got to
Yep.
get deeper than that, and that takes becoming self-aware initially, and then sort of remaining in this state of mindfulness as often as you can to take stock of what the impactors are on your life and on your consciousness and on your mood and on your mind state and on your spirits. And all of these things are trying to impact you at all times, and you're receiving information from every angle through vibration of every imaginable kind at all times. And until you become self-aware, you don't know to be mindful. Until you become mindful and maintain that state, you're not moment to moment aware of all these things that are impacting you. And once you go through that, you need to identify the moving components in your life that are making up what you are, which is your relationships. What are your relationships in life? You have a relationship with your job, with your dog, with your spouse, with your everything. And a lot of those relationships, for a lot of people who are going through the initial steps of this awakening, they don't realize that your life is really it's just comprised of all of your relationships and the experiences that you have in those relationships, and then what is the impact of those experiences on your life, for better or worse. Because everything in your life every relationship it says something about you and does something to you. It's
Right.
moving you in
Right.
some direction or another.
Yeah. Touching on what you just said about, the stories that we're telling, that's something that I often talk about. For when I look at my own life, and I certainly feel very blessed to have had the gifts and the experiences, and my life even now. I mean, you've been here to the Mystic Manor; it's pretty magical, right? It's I've had some great success in business, achieving what 1 in 10,000 entrepreneurs sets out to do as far as quantifiable success,
Yep.
with the business, and then the podcast, and now doing a TV style show. And, my life is like Burning Man 24/7 here at the Mystic Manor, and just this cool, playful adventure. And what I tell people, whenever they ask me sort of, what's the secret, how did you figure out whatever you figured out? And of course I have much more to learn and plenty of room for growth. I always say we teach best what we most need to learn, but
Of
what I
course.
have, the number one thing I have figured out, I feel that maybe sets me apart from the average person, is one thing, and it's that I'm really good at telling stories. And what that means, and I'll actually take that even further, not just telling stories, making up stories. Making up a story about who and what I am and what the nature of the situation in which I find myself is. Abracadabra I create as I speak. So we are all sorcerers channeling source. And what is source? A creator. So you are the creator and created rolled into one. So when I start telling the story of, oh my gosh, I'm one with everything and I can manifest all kinds of magic in my life, abracadabra, okay. And so it is. And so that's the only thing I've really done well, is I, take whatever's happening and spin it in a way that is self-serving in a good way. And we all have the power to do that. So that's what I encourage any and everyone to do that's listening, who maybe doesn't like where their life's at, or they really want a powerful shift, and they don't know how and where to go in order to make it happen. And oftentimes they're thinking about what they can do externally, when really there is no out there. It's all a reflection of your internal state. So it all starts with, start telling different stories about who you are, where you've been, where you came from, where you're going, all of those things. That's the only thing that I've ever done really effectively. It's like, no matter what challenge or comes my way, it's like, okay, how can I spin this? How can I find the silver lining? How can I transmute this lump of coal into a diamond by seeing it from a perspective where it actually serves me instead of thwarts me? And that's really the speaking of, the name of his book, Alchemy, that is the ultimate alchemy. That's how you actually transmute your life into something that is more reflective of, a party, right? A joyous celebration that you came here really, which is all of our birthright. And it's just a matter if we're going to step up and claim that birthright or not. And it all starts with the story we tell.
That's it. You talked a lot about alchemy too. And I think, alchemy is always on my mind. I was just having a conversation with the other day with a guy who has taken martial arts, like various different kinds of martial arts, and formalized them using alchemy, like earth, air, fire, water, ether, and turned like jiu-jitsu, for instance, into like every position has its own elemental sign, and then from that position you have the 5 different options of the 5 different elements to move. So one's a base attack, one is this, one's that, whatever. But we want to do a podcast together, but it's such a complex conversation that it's something we're having to really unpack and prepare for how we're going to deliver this and unpack this. And I've got to have a sacred geometry guy on the call with us, and I've got to have a jiu-jitsu guy, but they got to be the right people to unpack all of this. But I believe that it can be done. But I say all that just to say that alchemy is a powerful tool to understand. It's a powerful thing to understand, because the universe is not quite as complex as like modern scientists and scientists post Francis Bacon would have you believe. Right? There's an ancient Egyptian understanding called hermeticism, and it's sort of a philosophy, science, and probably a lot of the audience here has heard of hermeticism and knows what it is. Mm-hmm. But it's powerful stuff. And it's named hermeticism because of the Greek god of the messenger god Hermes, which comes from the ancient Egyptian god Thoth. And there's lots of other associations throughout the different religions and stuff of the ancient world. But hermeticism is an ancient philosophy and science and spirituality, or a spiritual framework that was practiced all over the world as far as we can tell. Certainly in every high civilization, hermeticism was practiced by cultures all over the world. And it's an amazing thing. And within hermeticism, you can understand alchemy. And within these things, you can begin to apply elements to your life and apply it. It's almost like a paint by color to your life through understanding alchemy, astrology, hermeticism, and all this type of stuff. And it's a really cool thing to do. If anyone is not familiar with hermeticism or with alchemy or astrology, it's really powerful stuff, because what it really does is it takes the finite amount of configurations that a human being's psyche is capable of, and then it just turns those into stories in the case of mythology, or into astronomical movements in the case of astrology. But it's, everything is everything, which in fact is one of the principles of hermeticism. There are 7 principles of hermeticism, and the first is that the universe is mental. Everything is a projection of the mind. Everything is a reflection of the mind. And the second hermetic principle is that everything is vibration. And we know that from Nikola Tesla and lots of other people, sure. Ken Wheeler. Everything is vibration in a different state. And then there's the principle of correspondence: as above, so below; as within, so without; as with the universe, so with the soul, and so forth. And so just by understanding these things, you can look at life in a very different way. Everything has poles. Everything flows. Everything has a cause and effect. And everything has its masculine and feminine parts to it too. And so, anybody who hasn't studied alchemy or hermeticism or any of that stuff, it's a powerful thing to do. People ask me all the time, what do you believe? Like, what's your worldview? What's your spiritual framework? So there you go. Go look into alchemy and astrology and hermeticism and shamanism. It'll make your life better.
Yeah. Shaman Durek, speaking of shamanism, was episode 1 of Optimistic, and he just wrote a book called Spirit Hacking, which is all about, techniques that he recommends people use to tap into some of their shamanistic, powers, if you will. And, I part of our conversation was really interesting because I have a friend who has studied and for many years under various shamans and has led ayahuasca journeys, plant medicine journeys for 25 years. And when I first was getting introduced to that whole world years ago, he kind of said to me, yeah, a lot of people out there claiming to be shamans, and really that's, not something I claim as someone who leads these plant medicine journeys. You have to be born into a lineage to be a shaman. And so then I had Shaman Durek on, years later on Optimistic, and, 6th generation shaman from Africa, and talking to him about that. And he said, that's actually not the case at all, that it's, it's something that like is more of a soul contract kind of thing. It's like spirit sort of chooses who will have, and go down this path. So I thought that was a really interesting variation, because you tend to think of a shaman, okay, it's someone who has to be born in the jungles in Ecuador or whatever it is. And actually, from this, one of the most powerful, spiritual teachers I know, who is from a long line of shamans, like, no, actually it's something that, comes from, your soul's choice in the spirit realm, where anyone sort of can choose that role of being the sage or the bridge to the spirit world, if you will. And I thought that was a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I think one of the important things that as spiritual people that we could really afford to do, and that we owe it to ourselves to do, is to not get so wrapped up in the definition of certain words and titles and all of that stuff. It's a super, super big thing that happens, right? So people will say, like, you can't be a shaman unless you're, 7 generations, jungle runner, that kind of thing, whatever. I mean, look, I look deeply into, things like, human emotion, into Jungian psychology, and trying to break down the archetypes of what the human mind is capable of. And again, we think of the human mind as being very complicated. It is. It's complex, right? There's a lot of different permutations and things. But if you think of the human mind as just this machine with a bunch of switches and sliders and knobs in it, right? Like an audio mixer or something for a DJ. It's just a bunch of knobs and switches and sliders. That's all it is. In terms of human emotion, and in terms of everything, there are a finite amount of options there. Right. We've only got about a dozen different human emotions. Right. So you've got anger and sadness and jealousy and fear and envy and whatever, there's a finite amount of these things. And, shamanism is a gift, or some would say maybe not a gift in some cases, for certain people with certain configurations, right? Certain psycho-spiritual configurations. And you might be born with these things. You might get these things after an accident. You might get these things after a spiritual awakening. But it certainly, I don't think it has to be something that you're born into.
You might get it by just telling the story. This is what I'm calling in for myself. I think of Julie Ryan, friend and guest on the show. She was a businesswoman, and said, okay, I want to open my psychic gifts. I'm choosing this. I'm telling the story that I can. And abracadabra, now she's like, I'm like a psychic buffet of gifts. And I wasn't born that way. I wasn't seeing spirits as a 5-year-old. It's something that I chose. And I think that's back to this storytelling thing. It's like, what are you calling in from the, toolbox of source that you want to bring into your life? Ultimately is the question. And do you believe you can?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Being able to tell your story is such a powerful thing, and you really, was it C.S. Lewis that made some comment or some statement he said about, you can't go back to the beginning and rewrite it, but you can start from the present and rewrite the ending, like talking about a story. And the power of storytelling is extremely powerful. And, while we're talking about shamanism and we're talking about storytelling, really it was the bards and the minstrels and the storytellers of the ancient world, particularly sort of where my ancestry comes from, in the Celtic and Nordic regions and stuff.
Me too.
The Germanic peoples, these were your bards and your minstrels and the people who sang and told the stories. So for anyone who's like watched The Witcher on Netflix, there's a kind of a minstrel guy that follows them around and writes music and stuff. Well, these guys really did that, and they would tell stories, right? So they wouldn't even write these things down, but they've they've had anthropologists that have now studied these minstrels and bards, and there aren't many left. I can't remember the particular one that I'm referencing in my memory right now, but it was on a documentary I saw like 10 years ago, and there was this culture. I want to say it was like northwestern Turkey. These tribesmen, they had these minstrels and storytellers, and there was very, very few of them left. But these guys were telling stories that were like, I don't know, a million words long, right? Like these were like extremely long stories. It was like the Iliad and the Odyssey times five, and they would just memorize these things, and then they would record them telling the story, and then they would record another minstrel telling the same story, and it would be the same within like 2 or 3 words, because the sacredness and the holiness of storytelling was so high and so profound to this culture that their sort of their shamanic belief system, their spiritual belief system was invested and sort of imbued into their storytellers and their minstrels. And so these people took the vocation of storytelling very, very seriously, and they told it very accurately every time. So I think maybe we could learn from that a little bit and take a nod from that in the stories that we tell in our own lives, right? We talked jokingly earlier about you saying that, you know, you're like, you're this positive, wonderful, flowery virus. It's kind of it's a good model. I understand how it works because, you know, certainly your podcast and your message spreads around. We got to find better wording for it because, you know, now we manifested.
Yep. No, that's
it's
funny.
It's all your fault. It is
all my fault. Yeah.
And
right.
Now you've got a true captive audience.
If I'm in my own private universe, as I often say, you know, and I'm the only one here and everything's a prop in my movie, and same goes for you and everyone out there listening, right? So from my perspective, okay, I'm the only one here and everything's reflecting me back to me. It's like, oh, yeah, time to use a different word. And that's also judging that this quote unquote virus spreading is a quote unquote bad thing. When really, that's just a perspective that is very one-dimensional. And what are the gifts that it's bringing to the world? What you know, what's coming out of it? What's going to be birthed out of it? Is the butterfly, when it goes into the chrysalis and the caterpillar melts down into a goo so that it can ultimately be reformed into a butterfly? Is that a bad thing too? Right? Well, what perspective are we talking from? From the caterpillar's perspective.
I'll point out something interesting that my girlfriend Ashley mentioned or pointed out one time, is that the butterfly goes into a chrysalis, right? And then it melts out into the yucky stuff.
Yep.
Do you know what the cells are that like eat it and that help give birth to from the caterpillar to the butterfly? Do you know what those cells are called?
The imaginal cells.
The imaginal cells.
Yep.
They're the imaginal. So it's like, is it in fact our imagination that gives birth to a story that in those moments when everything else in our life is breaking down, we then find a new beginning on the edge of uncertainty? Is it the imaginals? Is it the imagination that is, you know, that's giving rise to that? And I think so. I think might be something there.
Absolutely. I love the quote, just when the caterpillar thought its world was over, it becomes a butterfly. Right. And oftentimes it's darkest before the dawn. That goes back to this whole idea of the story that you're telling. Right. For me, I've seen, you know, even recently, I mean, I've had a series of challenging things, you know, from, what kind of ripple of impact does the coronavirus have on the retreats that help to, you know, sustain everything that's happening here at the Mystic Manor and the new show and, you know, my livelihood in general. And I also have another travel company that's part of that equation for me, my sustainability. Oh, well, you know, is it, you know, a bad thing that all of a sudden all this income stream evaporates, or can I view it like I often talk about this, you know, when you're sitting on the beach and you see the water, you know, suck out into the ocean and all the sand is exposed, right? Well, you know, in that moment, it is dry. It is, you know, there is a lack of water. It's like, oh, wow. Like it just continued to retract. It was a retractory thing, right? Well, what's coming behind that? Another wave, another swell. And once you can understand that and you can start noticing the patterns in your life, how many times in your life have you had, like, you know, challenging thing happen, challenging thing happen, challenging thing happen. When I see challenging things stack up now, I'm just like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. Ooh, there's something really good coming behind. There's a swell. The wave is, this retractory motion is bound to swing back the other way. And for me, that's really how, a way that you can start navigating these dry spells with more grace and ease, knowing they're just part of a dance that's ultimately happening. And it's, you can't have one without the other.
So again, this is the Hermetic principle of rhythm. Everything flows.
Right.
Everything ebbs. Everything oscillates. Everything goes in, time goes out. Pendulum swings both ways. That's exactly right. This too shall pass, right? All good things, all bad things. This too shall pass. And I really do. I think that this coronavirus thing is it's getting a lot of us to look back at what's important. I know a lot of people are spending time with their family. They're learning how to be alone with their thoughts.
Yep.
You can't really get away from yourself whenever you're, supposed to be self-isolating in an apartment or whatever. So, people are becoming mindful again, I think, of the very important life aspect that is your food supply and your supply chain.
Yes.
All this stuff matters. I grew up, I don't know if you knew this, Brandon, but I grew up on a farm, and we still have a little farm, but we live near my parents who have a ranch, and we grew up in a farming community. And so, I can only imagine what a savage I probably sound like to everybody here, because I'm from Texas. And so we do these kinds of things, but we would have cattle slaughtered and pigs slaughtered, and we would raise these things, and we would eat them, and we would fish for our food, and we would hunt I almost said birds and deer. We would hunt beer. Well, we did that too.
I hunted Corona, actually, for the coronavirus.
I've got a case of Corona.
Wrangled me some Corona.
We did do that. I don't think we drank Corona, but we there were certainly, we would hunt deer and birds and things, and I'm not saying that anybody needs to do that or should do that, or that anyone here might not find that revolting, but it is a natural way that humans did survive for, pretty much the entirety of our evolution. And, honestly, what I see where I live now, which is still a pretty rural place, we're 30 minutes outside of 20 minutes outside of the suburbs, an hour from Dallas. But what I see here is that really a very small impact on this community, because a lot of us grow our own food. We have our own chickens, our own eggs, our own beef, and life here is a lot more dialed into nature than it is for if you're used to living in the city and stuff. And so I'm not saying anybody needs to move to the farms or any of that kind of stuff, or that one way of living is superior to another, but there is something to be said about having at least an understanding of where your natural place is in the food chain, and understanding just a little bit of how to get along with nature and how to thrive in nature. You know what I mean? And so maybe that's something that could come out of this, I don't think that I think it's terrible when people lose their lives in a tragic way, but I also think that there is a sickness that has been perpetuated by our society and by certain actors within our society, that we've become very afraid of death. We have a very unhealthy relationship with one of the two most certain things in life, birth and death. And we celebrate birth and we're terrified of death. And it's important, I think, to say that this isn't the only way. This isn't the only kind of relationship to have with death. And it certainly isn't the only kind of relationship that a lot of other cultures have had with death. And, when you're afraid of death, you can be manipulated in lots of different ways. And you see people cowering and huddling in their homes because they're afraid to go out and see someone across the yard. The Coast Guard is arresting surfers who are going out to isolated beaches and surfing or paddleboarding or whatever. And it's all around this insane fear of death. If you were to show this to, a lot of the different tribal and Aboriginal people around the world and explain to them this kind of panic that's going on, they wouldn't get it. It just wouldn't make any sense, because the idea of being horrified of death is a fairly new idea, as of the last, few thousand years as far as culture goes. And so, reconnecting with our spirituality is probably not a bad idea. while we're inside doing push-ups and pull-ups and watching Netflix, man, maybe reconnect with spirit a little bit and look into some different spiritual ways of thinking and believing that don't involve being terrified of the inevitable.
Yeah, totally, totally. Um, Eckhart Tolle talks about this. Death is a stripping away of all that is not you. The secret to life is to die before you die and find that there is no death. I love that. That's like one of my favorite quotes by Eckhart. And it's like, realizing like death is a birth and birth is a death. When you were born here, you died in a sense to where you came from. You left, you went out to adventure into 3D. And so in a sense, there was a death that happened. And then when you die, I believe you come back there, you go back to where we started from, and you leave here, you die to this place, but then you're born back into non-physical where you started from. And when sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think that like when people take psychedelics, that it makes a huge impact on them and helps them understand those concepts that like death's not the end, it's just another doorway?
Yeah, it really, I definitely think so. I think it's, it's like Peter Pan, I think said to die will be an awfully big adventure. And I think psychedelics actually show you that like,
provide that
wow,
adventure.
Yeah, like this is all an adventure. Like, you die and you get over here and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm laughing at what I was so scared of and realize, this is so natural. I've done this a gazillion times and I'll do it, infinite more times because this is the ebb and flow. Speaking of the rhythm of existence, it's into physical, out of physical, into physical, out of physical. And that is just a part of the rhythm of existence that we've been doing forever. And meanwhile, we have amnesia to that. And then so now it becomes a scary thing again, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, when really it's just like, leaving a room when you've had enough of what's happening in that room. Walking out of a movie theater when you've seen enough of that particular movie and you want to go do something else. So, once you can, for me, I really feel like, the Peter Pan does it. I'm not anxious to go there, but I don't want to, hurry it up because this is an awfully big adventure too. But I don't have that fear at all. I literally feel that way about it. Like, oh my gosh, wow, what am I going to get shown when I die? I'm going to get to see the Akashic Records and all the reasons me and Adam connected out of 7 billion people on the planet is because we have a rich history that we did, here, there, and we did this before and that before, and we crossed paths in this life and that life. And I believe that's the case with everyone that's in your life. I had a guest on Positive Head a while back. I forget who it was off the top of my head, the name, but one of my interviews, he, it's a guy who said he had full recollection into the relationships that we had or we have with each other. And he was like, oh, let me tap in real quick right at the beginning of our interview. And he's like, oh yeah, about 20% of the people you interview, you have very, like rich past life experience with, if you will. And I thought, like, yeah, what an interesting perspective. And he even when he goes, oh, we definitely have some history. Let me do this, little energetic karmic clearing, and who knows for sure whether it's true or not. I'm not claiming it definitely is or isn't, but conceptually, I think it's very, very interesting and makes a lot of sense to me that then, you're attracting these characters in. And of course, there's a lot of people who have gotten a glimpse on the other side, such as Dr. Eben Alexander, another, past guest that I had who, went into a coma and was, basically they pulled the plug. He was, he was basically going to die. His brain was fried and they said, pull the plug. And then he miraculously came back. And all he remembered at first was his story, his journey on the other side and what he was shown. And like that, we reincarnate over and over again with these soul fams, these soul family that we've chosen, to take the long-term multi-lifetime adventure with into 3D. And we continue to show up in each other's lives and play roles for one another as we sort of level up through the game of physicality. And it just, to me, it's like, what an adventure, like what a brilliant game that has been set up by our higher selves. And, and for that matter, I then also will try and think like, what would a bigger, more expanded version of me do? What would, more evolved Brandon do? Like, whenever I'm trying to decode something in my life, I'm like, okay, yeah, I could see it going this way. I could see me setting myself up that way. I know how bigger Brandon would think, expanded Brandon would think. He would do this like funny shit to like, just a cosmic. A lot of times I think, we take life so seriously and really it's like, your higher self is this great jokester. I mean, God has a great sense of humor, I think. You have to set up some of the things that are going on here. It takes, I think humor is the number one way to actually get through it with grace, actually. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about our new sponsor, BetterHelp. As you know, we do everything we possibly can on the show to help people shift their perspectives to help them lead a healthy and happy life. That being said, sometimes we really just need someone to talk to directly that can help us navigate whatever challenge we're going through at that time. And if you're at that point in your life currently, BetterHelp makes this process super convenient by connecting you with a professional counselor in a safe and private environment, either on video, phone, or via text chats. BetterHelp has licensed therapists that specialize in almost any scenario you may be struggling with, such as depression, anxiety, grief, trauma, or relationship issues. And if you don't like the counselor you get assigned for any reason, you can request a new one at any time. Best of all, not only is it a convenient option, it's also affordable. And if you use the code POSITIVEHEAD, it's even more affordable because you get 10% off your first month. So if you're hearing this and you get the feeling that one of BetterHelp's 3,000 licensed therapists could help get you to where you want and deserve to be mentally, head over to betterhelp.com/positivehead and be sure to use the discount code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, to get 10% off your first month.
Humor's great, man. Humor is super important stuff. I'll tell you, you're talking about past life experiences. Have you ever done a past life regression?
Many years ago I did, and it didn't, I have a lot of people, even here at the Mystic Manor, people regularly do QHHT or past life regression work, and people have some powerful experiences where it's very detailed. I don't feel like I've had that experience fully. I mean, I've had other people who tap in and tell me about my past lives, or and I've heard many times from other people accounts. But me personally having that experience of like, oh my gosh, I got a vision and it was so real. And, I can't say that I've fully had that myself.
Yeah, I had a buddy that he's a hypnotherapist, and he also does past life regressions, and he does what is it called? The spirit. He'll help you find like your spirit animal and stuff, which I'm really fascinated in trying that one. I've never done it before.
Cool.
But earlier you were talking about channeling, and like to me, this all kind of ties together because a lot of people will say, well, they'll read something that was supposedly channeled, and they'll take objection to it, and they'll be like, that wasn't channeled. Channeling's not real, whatever. But there really is just an understanding that you can have, or you may not have, that about how channeling works. And there are these archetypal places, right, where you can sort of slide into these psychic grooves and sort of embody or take on a certain type of consciousness, right? It's almost an attitude and an intellect and a psyche all on its own. And that's really how channeling works. And people do that. I mean, most of your artists that you can think of channel, and they do their work. And whenever Jeff Sullivan came out, before we went to Optimistic, to your show in LA back in November, we did a podcast, 2 days worth of podcast in our studio. And we talked about this at length. I mean, Jeff channels his work. Most of these artists that you and I know, and that most people enjoy their artwork, they're getting there by channeling.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful thing. But it happens in these sort of archetypal places. You've got to get your mind cleared and get into these really quiet sort of mind states and get focused and tap into that. But I think that there's a link, dude, between that and our dreams and these other lives, because so my buddy did this past life regression with me, and I would, like you, I couldn't ever really have any really vivid, I didn't have any vivid experience with it.
Right.
Sort of a staticky, he was like, hey, remember something that happened to you when you were like in your teens? And so I went to my 18th birthday because it was a big celebration and stuff. And even that was really staticky. And then he's like, all right, go back to your childhood. And I was like 5 riding my bike. And that was really staticky. And then he said, go back to your birth. And then that was the first and only time it got clear was before my birth. And it was this very, it reminded me of like Finding Nemo whenever they're lost in the dark and that fish comes along and he's like the angler fish and he has a light on his head and there's all these dust particles floating around at the bottom of the ocean. It's all black and it's just a big light and there's just dust particles floating toward the light. So I kind of went to a place like that. And then anyway, but I did go beyond and see some things, but it was never very clear. But once on a psychedelic trip with a fairly high dose of mushrooms, 7 or 8 grams, I saw something that was absolutely tremendous and was shown this giant field. Imagine just a beautiful crop field with purple bushels and just millions of rows. And I'm walking between these rows and there's these beautiful purple bushels and it's like twilight overhead. The sun is setting and the light's just beautiful. And it's just this big, supremely serene and gorgeous and tranquil field, just as far as the eye can see, with rolling hills and millions of rows with these beautiful planted purple bushels. And so I call it the dream field. And what I notice is I look at one of these purple bushels and I just look down. They're only about knee high. And I look down at this purple bushel and what I see is not necessarily a plant, but there's a sort of holographic, call it a movie, that's playing within this little purple holograph. And I look at it, and as soon as I focus, without anything but intent, I zoom into the thing, and I become an actor, a player in that movie, that hologram that was playing. And what was going on in that first bushel was a dream that I had had when I was like 13 years old.
Wow!
And what was fascinating was that, unlike a dream, I had total presence of mind, total situational awareness, and I realized that in that moment, what I thought was a dream when I was a teenager didn't seem so much like a dream in that moment, because I had taken on the life of a different person, and I knew everything about that person's life. I knew their scars, their experiences, I knew all my siblings' names. I knew my parents' names. I knew the name of the town I was in, and it was a vastly different world, but I was there and I had every memory, and I was just as much that little, happened to be a little girl. I was just as much that little girl as I have ever been Adam Nix in that moment.
Wow.
And it was just mind blowing. And so anyway, I zip out of that dream, and I'm standing back in the dream field, and I just get sucked back into my body in the dream field. And I'm just going, oh my God, this is amazing. I walk a little bit further and I look down into another bushel. I zip into this. I'm into a different life. Again, I have every memory of this person's life. I was some guy in his mid 40s in some weird Middle Eastern place I'd never seen before. My daughter had pet snakes that were chasing her around, and I knew everybody. I knew where I was. I knew all my neighbors. I knew I was stressed about some fight I'd had with my wife, one of my wives earlier that day. And so I did this about 100 times over the course of one fairly extensive mushroom trip one night. Totally changed everything that I know about this reality. And went to the Earthkeeper conference a couple weeks later and met, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's head of the Edgar Cayce Foundation. And
in Virginia Beach, where I'm originally from.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. Yeah, and I can't remember his name, but he looks like he reminds me of Mark Twain. Short little Southerner guy. But anyway, you can look him up. Whoever's head of the Edgar Cayce Foundation or whatever it is. But John something. Anyway,
my dad might have met him. My dad used to do, basically as a field engineer, he did some work from time to time at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. So if he's been there a long time, my dad might have actually interacted with him many years ago too.
That's crazy. Yeah. See, I grew up being very, very aware of Edgar Cayce, but I always relegated him into this category of research topics that I just never had high fascination for personally. Because it was, I don't know, there just wasn't a lot of, I don't know. It didn't really ever bite for me. I didn't really ever know that I fully got into it. But after going to Earthkeeper, after having this experience in the dream field, which when I came back from this trip, you know, it's important to say that I explained this trip to everyone in my circle, right? All my tribe, my girlfriend, everybody. So everybody knew it. And, you know, if you've worked with these substances enough, you know, with different plant medicines, and someone comes to you with a story like this, you know, your first reaction, particularly if you know that person and trust them, it isn't one of skepticism. It's one of bewilderment. It's like, oh my God, that's crazy. But you can imagine it being a thing. So anyway, my girlfriend and I go to Earthkeeper, and you know, Graham Hancock's there, and Scott Walter's there, and Randall Carlson, and a bunch of people are there and doing their thing. And then I think William Henry was there, a bunch of neat people. And we ended up meeting the guy that does the Edgar Cayce Foundation. And on the way home, we're driving like 4 hours back to Dallas from Little Rock, Arkansas, and we turned on some different lectures from the Edgar Cayce guy. And as he's reading Edgar Cayce's work, Ashley, my girlfriend, just looks at me and she just goes, "Oh my God!" Like everything he's explaining about this sort of afterlife place that Cayce would go to and tap into to do his past life regressions and do all this stuff. She said, "That's exactly your dream. That's exactly what he's describing. It's a dream field. There was this silver Mercury sort of portal in the sky that I got pulled through on a silver string. All this crazy stuff I'd never heard before, that this Edgar Cayce guy was then reading Edgar Cayce's stuff and talking about it. So even though I didn't have a profound experience with my past life regression, and I'm not sure that, you know, someone like me could have those. I think that they're meant for certain kinds of people that are wired a certain way. I don't think I'm ever going to have a past life regression. It's going to do for me what that mushroom trip did. But it was certainly one of the craziest things in my life, for sure.
Wow, that's a wild account, and what an example of if you haven't experienced plant medicines, it's like, you know, what is possible, right?
Yeah.
And obviously it doesn't mean that's going to happen to you, but certainly you're not alone in having that kind of an experience, you know, with plant medicine. For me, I you know, what's happened with me as someone who's explored a lot, you know, as a skilled psychonaut, if you will, you know, just in recent years, I've noticed for me, Adam, I'll do a plant medicine. It even happened recently. Just last week was the first time I've done any type of a psychedelic in a quite a long time, and having an experience where it's like full on, like, I don't know if it's a kundalini activation or what, but the physical energy that is flowing through me is like, it's almost like I'm going to explode into, you know, a billion atoms, you know, pun intended, Adam. So it literally is like, I'm just like, there's so much energy coursing through my system, I can barely contain it. And the last 3 times I've done anything over the last few years, it's happened every time. And it's like, all of a sudden I'm like super sensitive and have these, and they're not easy. It's not easy either, the experience that's happened. It's not even like, it's kind of like, do I want to go here anymore? Because this is very challenging, right? And it feels like, for me, it's happening almost as a way to expand my nervous system, if you will, to be able to take in more and to channel more light, in a sense, is what it intuitively, I can't say for sure, but what it sort of intuitively feels like for me is like, okay, we're gonna, you know, thanks for taking this medicine. Now we're gonna, you know, expand and stretch you so that you can actually, you know, be a container that can hold more light, which is, you know, the story that I'm telling. I want to roll on their stage where I am able to reach more people and affect more people. And it's like, okay, you want to be a brighter light, you've got to be able to handle higher voltage, right? And that's really what it's happened to me of late.
And the Kundalini will do that, right? I mean, that's I talk to so many people that are doing all kinds of different things in their lives right now, but the Kundalini seems to be a recurring theme, that people are having these Kundalini awakenings. And you know, for me, for the past year, with working with different medicines, Kundalini as a theme, as a recurring theme, has been a thing for me. So I don't know. Do you do any Kundalini work, or do you guys do it out there at the mansion?
It's funny that you say that. My friend Alicia just messaged me. Literally, I typed to her just as we were starting this She just sent over a kundalini breathwork exercise.
Awesome.
In a band for many years. I originally from Virginia.
You were in a band called
I was in a band
Kundalini.
called Kundalini. Yeah. Although I have not practiced Kundalini as much as like my friend who just sent me a video on Kundalini a minute ago. But it seems like it's something. I have another friend, Stephanie, who's I think of her about a year or so ago. She had in her case, she was in a fit of anger, and she had this very like powerful emotional moment, and then all of a sudden she felt her Kundalini activate in that moment, and it's never turned off since. And it was a year or so since, and she's like, it's beautiful, it's ecstasy sometimes, and it's I can't sleep other times, and it's and that's kind of the thing with Kundalini awakening. It's kind of like, okay, you're going to be blasted open, and that's not necessarily just all roses and butterflies. It's like it's going to tear through your chakras and burn down any blockages and that kind of thing, and it's no joke.
Yeah, no, it really isn't. And for anyone who's not familiar with the concept of the Kundalini, although I imagine most of the audience probably is, but the Kundalini is you could think of it in lots of different ways. There's no like one truth on this, but just I imagine it like two serpents of energy, masculine and feminine energy, that are coming up from your root chakra, which is down near your pelvic floor, and these two spiraling serpent energies. They come swirling up around your spine like a helix, and then out the top of your crown chakra. And so, for anyone who's ever seen the symbol of the caduceus, which is the symbol,
the medical symbol,
for modern medicine, you can see the two snakes wrapping around a spine or a magic wand. And
then you have at the bottom, you have at the top, so you have the two snakes winding up, wrapped around the staff or the spine. And, Kundalini, the way I used to always describe it when people asked me what the band name meant, especially 20 years ago when people were, way less tapped into this stuff, I feel.
You can only imagine the looks that you got 20 years ago.
I got a lot of looks. You're like, what? Cunnilingus? Woo? What? And so, the way I would describe it is Kundalini is supposedly a dormant energy source that's at the base of your spine. When you activate it, in Stephanie's case, through anger, other people through meditation, through Kundalini yoga, through whatever may trigger this sleeping serpent. Tantric sex is
way to activate it.
Yeah, right. This sleeping serpent to arise and awaken. Then the energy goes up your spine all the way to the top of your head, which in the caduceus, you then see the wings at the top of where the snakes are, which is like symbolizes like enlightenment. You're right. Exactly.
It's basically Kundalini is just like Red Bull. It's a replacement for Red Bull.
Right.
That's now how I'm going to describe Kundalini from now on to people. It's basically Red Bull. It's spiritual Red Bull.
Yeah. It's a Red Bull competitive product.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, if you like Red Bull, you may also like Kundalini awakenings. But no, so the Kundalini it's like to me, I think it's the most not necessarily well hidden, but it's the best kept secret of spirituality, maybe of the Eastern world, maybe the best kept secret of the human condition. Period. Like I put it at that level, and I know that may sound kind of extreme, but we as human beings, we're intensely sexual beings at our core, and the Kundalini
we are. Life is a sexually transmitted disease.
You always gotta call everything a virus or disease. We're gonna work on your positive vocabulary, bro.
You're right. I gotta work on this. How do I spin that? It's a sexually transmitted. I
don't know. We're just gonna have to crack open a different science book.
Right. What's the opposite of disease? Innies?
Cures don't spread virally, but even like on the internet, you can say things go viral. I don't know. Yeah, but it is.
We'll work on this.
Life is sexually transmitted. We'll just leave it at that.
It's a sexually transmitted phenomenon.
There you go. And the Kundalini is sexual energy, and at our core, we are sexual beings, and the most powerful energy that we possess is our sexual energy. And the sexual energy doesn't just have to be used for the act of sex, right? But can be used for the act of creation,
right?
And there's about a million different ways that we can create in life. and we can imbue those with powerful, potent, balanced, harmonic sexual energy, and use that as a boost to create in a lot more prolific and profound ways. But again, as a society, one of the things that we've fallen into is this trap where we misuse our sexuality. We demonize sexuality, we repress it, and then when you repress something, the only way that it comes out is in unhealthy ways, right? Which is you look at Hollywood and the music industry, and a lot of what's going on, and it's signs of sexual promiscuity is a sign of sexual repression, right? Because it's like obesity and anorexia, right?
Right.
It's two polarities of the same of problems in the same domain,
right?
That's exactly what it is. So the kundalini is really at its core, it's a sexual energy. It's male and female sexual energy, and this is where I believe, and a lot of people believe, that the concept of like the Chinese dragon, where it comes from, is actually coming from the kundalini. You see this serpent with this great big plumed head on it. And if you've ever had a powerful kundalini awakening, and I've talked to hundreds of people that have, and for myself as well, when you have a powerful kundalini awakening, and I'm talking about the kind that has you writhing on the floor, feeling like you've got God himself has reached down your spine from your root chakra and is pulling your soul out through the top of your head.
Exactly.
That the imagery that comes to mind in that place often for a lot of people is that of a dragon, of a serpent with a lion head, or a big flaming head, or a big roaring, raging head on top of a serpent that's going up your spine. And if you look around the world, there are remnants in the form of ancient ruins that have been found all over the world, in Mexico and Cambodia and southwestern Pacific, all that stuff, where there are serpent statues. Even the southwestern U.S., snakes were worshipped and all this stuff. But the serpent, the plumed serpent, the feathered serpent, the winged serpent, like Brandon was just saying on the caduceus, this is a symbol of the awakened kundalini, and it's a really fascinating thing to look into. So yeah, you guys go check that out. It's it's one of the most powerful forces that the human condition possesses and has available. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, and it seems to be coming much more into the mainstream awareness as well.
That's where I was going with that. Yeah, the last couple of years, it's popping out everywhere, and lots of people I'm talking to are having more experiences with it. So this would be a great time, if you haven't already, to work on that kundalini stuff and tap into that stuff. Open up your hips. We also, as a society, we sit so damn much, and so when you sit, you get tension in your lower spine and your lower back, and that's down where your root and sacral chakras are, and those things get all jammed up. You know what that does is that causes sexual dysfunction. Your sacral chakra is also associated with like your ability to take risks and your desire to go out and do fun things. So you're doing kundalini workouts and opening up your hips can really it can go a long way in combating all of that tension down in that area. And as above, so below. If you have problems in your lower chakras, you probably have problems in your upper chakras too. A lot of times, root and sacral chakra blockages will result in throat chakra and heart chakra blockages as well. So you can see that in people's bodily shape. You can see that in people's habits and behaviors and all that stuff, because as within, so without. So you can diagnose yourself with a chakra blockage by looking in the mirror and just analyzing your behaviors. Go do some kundalini stuff and work that shit out. It'd be great.
I think of all I could think of when you're saying that, it's about working your hips out, is Happy Gilmore. It's all in the hips. It's all in the hips.
It is all in the hips, man. We got to get loose, dude. We got to get loose. You had Trevor Hall on. Matter of fact, I don't know if I even told you this last time we hung out, but you had Trevor Hall on your show a while back.
Yep. Great singer-songwriter.
Yeah, if anybody who's not listening to Trevor Hall, you're missing out. You must just go do it.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's amazing.
Definitely want to have him on a episode of Optimistic when we resume recording, probably this summer. And we have music at the outro of every episode, just like a traditional late night style show. And Trevor's right up there on the top of my list of next season when we begin recording again, to have him on an episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna need an invite to that show.
You have it.
I love you. So Trevor said something in that episode. So you were asking him like how it goes, and he's like, "Man, I got all this going on, all that going on. I'm dancing with it all." And that phrase that he used is now stuck on a sticky note on my mirror in my bathroom. So I see it every morning ever since.
Love that.
But it's such a beautiful thing, and this dovetails with a lot of what we're talking about. Dancing with it all. So I'm going to tie this into the kundalini because that's where we just were. And I'm going to tie this into telling a different story, which is where we were earlier on. So a lot of times whenever we get caught up in the midst of battling for our sanity or battling for peace in life, or we're battling to pay the bills, or we're battling to get through and connect to our kids, or we're battling to make a relationship work, we're battling to get noticed at the job or whatever, all these things, compounding in our lives, it can just feel like it's just a battle, and it can suck the life out of us. Tell a different story.
Yep.
If you pay attention to how you're describing what's going on in your life at a given time, man, I'm just fighting the good fight, right? That's like such a common thing to hear. At least, what I hear a lot is, I'm fighting the good fight. It's an old thing. Just take that, whatever that is that you're used to hearing, whatever you might think of. Maybe it's not fight the good fight, but something like that. Read between the lines here, and then replace that with I'm dancing with it all.
Dancing with it all. I love it.
Dancing with it all.
It makes me think of Matt Kahn, who I mentioned earlier, is most recent as of this recording, optimistic guest, and he says, whatever arises, love that, and that's really the same thing. It's like that is the path to transmuting anything that is you maybe from one perspective you'd view as a fight. Is instead of fighting it, what if you stop shaking your fist at it and you say, okay, this is divine as all the things that it's really easy to be grateful for and to celebrate. This is just as divine, just as necessary, and it's arising, so it must be arising because it's meant to arise, and it's actually happening for me and not to me, as all things are. So I'm going to love it because it's here. And that is the way, that is the path through, through that challenge point and out the other side, I believe.
Yeah, totally. The journey is the goal. We say that like all the time. It's like the biggest thing we say in our house all the time. Journey is the goal. Dance with it all. The journey is the goal. And it's like what you just said, if something arises into your sphere of awareness, it's there to teach you something. And a lot of times, like we'll be on a path and we're headed toward a certain destination, and then a thing pops into that path and we're like, oh shit, I don't want to deal with this right now. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I planned for. This sucks. And it's really easy to get wrapped up in how that deviation from your plan ruined everything. And I do it all the time. I'm like the worst person in the world at like trying to mastermind this whole plan. And I'm just, over here, like in my own head, I'm like this composer with this big chaotic symphony, and I'm, my hair's going everywhere, and I'm just, but the plan is working. Right. And then like one thing goes wrong, and then like I turn into Hannibal Lecter, and I just want to eat the person that screwed up, which is almost always me.
Yes, life is what happens when your plans don't work out. So
that's exactly right. Life is what happens when your plans don't work out. And so then when things don't go well, good example is that, so I own a technology company. That's how I pay the bills, and the podcast and the platform and my book and everything. This is all like my passion, and helping people. But we've been doing really well. And 2020 has been great for us. We've been in business since 2005. And then the Coronapalooza 2020 lock-in extravaganza.
Woo!
And that life is what happens when what'd you say?
Life is what happens when your plans don't work out.
When your plans don't work out, right? So the plans we have for 2020 are officially in the mud. And I gave myself like one day to panic. I gave myself one day, like one afternoon of business to go, wow, this is worst case scenario.
Right.
And then the next day I woke up and I brushed my teeth and I saw that sticky note on my mirror, and it said, dance with it all. And I thought of you, and I thought of Trevor, and I thought of the lessons in my life that I've learned since implementing that philosophy of dancing with it all.
Yeah.
My life has changed from that. And that has spun out into our whole tribe, my friends, other men, other fathers, and women, and just the brothers and sisters that I share my life with. Everybody is familiar with me now using that term, right? So everybody's always used to me saying the journey is the goal. But now I dance with it all, and they get it. So like I take jiu-jitsu, and like one of my best friends is a coach there. He's a black belt, and when they always laugh at me because like when we're doing warm-ups and we're jogging around the gym, I'm always like dancing while I'm jogging. Right. I'm not just running military fashion, and of course it's jiu-jitsu, so people are all, kind of whatever. But I'm over here sort of dancing flamboyantly, jogging around. Everybody makes fun of me for it. But my hips are looser than all of their hips.
Right.
So that's the key there. Dance with it all. And here's the thing. Everything is everything. I'm going to go back to this hermetic principle of correspondence and tie in why the Kundalini and Trevor Hall and all of this stuff all ties together, is because everything is everything. The way that you do one thing in life is the way that you do a lot of things in life.
Yep.
And if you can learn to be flexible and dance with the situations in your life, then you can learn to be flexible and dance in your physical body. And I just did a podcast last week with Ryan Mickler of the Order of Man podcast, and we were talking about this, like your ability to impact your body, like is a lot greater than your ability to impact your mind and your spirit at times, right? So like if you're in a chaotic mental place and you're having a mental breakdown, it may be really hard to just tell yourself, hey, be quiet. Don't have this mental breakdown. It'll be okay. That's tough.
Right.
But you can drop down and do a push-up. You know what I mean? You can do a sit-up. You can go for a walk. You can impact your body. You have the most direct connection to impact changes in your body, versus your mind and spirit. But since it's all connected, you can help yourself do that. So what I'm saying is that by hearing Trevor Hall use the term dance with it all, it changed the story that I was telling about the problems in my life and the challenges in my life. And then they became artifacts in my life. Then they became dance partners in my life.
Right.
So it went from negative to neutral to positive. And now literally no matter what happens with my business, all the way up to and including the implosion of a 15-year-old nationally functioning company, I'm ready to dance with all of it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to continue to be blessed and we're going to pull through it and do great. But dance with it all. Be flexible. Be like water, like Bruce Lee talked about, like Sun Tzu talked about. Be like water. Dance with it all. Be flexible. And if you can do it physically, the more you can do it physically, the more you can do it, like with your body, the more you can do it with different, figuratively with different things in your life too.
Absolutely.
That's one of those things that the hermetic principle of correspondence has taught me, is that everything is everything. And if you can learn to do something in your body, whether it's overcome challenges or be flexible or whatever, or dance, it helps you dance with the other shit that comes down the road in life. It's a very cool thing. So again, thanks for having Trevor on, because it's been like one of the most transformative little tidbits I've picked up from anybody in the last year of my life.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, this has been awesome. I've picked up quite a few tidbits from you, my friend, as I knew I would. And I know the audience is super stoked to have, been exposed to the brilliance that is Adam Nix. What is the best way for folks to follow you, follow your story? Obviously, the Wayfinder podcast. Is there another way that they can connect with you?
Yeah, well, so just wayfinderpodcast.com is the easiest way to find the show. And of course, if you want to support us on Patreon, there's a nice big pretty link in the middle of the landing page on wayfinderpodcast.com. You can go to the Patreon.
Cool.
We're still very much looking for ways to incentivize people to become patrons of the podcast. We want to make sure that people are getting something for that. So we're not really pushing the Patreon right now that much, but what I am pushing and begging for is ideas for what people would like, to become patrons, because we have endless, we have an endless well of shit that we could dig up to give you guys. We're full of content.
Endless well of shift.
Yes. Yeah. Of shift.
Yes.
and we can totally supply you guys with all kinds of fun stuff. We're always carrying cameras around and we're cutting up, and everybody knows my co-host and one of my closest friends, JC Abbott. We're always doing stuff together. We work together at the tech company. We're always having a good time. So if you guys want anything on that Patreon, just connect with us and let us know. And the easiest way to reach me is through the Instagram, which is, of course, Wayfinder Podcast on there. So you can reach out to me on there, and we address questions and stuff on the podcast. We reach out to guests. If you have any guests you want to send us, that's it. And we are just about to finally launch our online store, which we're super excited about. We're going to be, we have a lot of original clothing designs, jewelry designs. We have candles and all kinds of fun hippie stuff. But it's all coming from true artisans, right? So we're selling elderberry syrup and crystals and candles and oil kits and all of this stuff.
Wow.
So it's not like buying it from Amazon or Ulta or whoever else, big places you do that from. These designs are all coming from my mind and from the minds of Jeff Sullivan and friends of mine who are artists,
Cool.
Robert Grant. We're designing all this stuff. And like I said, yeah, clothing, jewelry, art, decor, candles, crystals, oils, supplements, all that stuff. And that's wokeshop.com. And we'll be launching, well, we kind of plan to launch, April 1st, but this whole thing's been kind of weird for us too. So hopefully May 1st on the launch date for Woke Shop, and we'll keep you guys posted through the Instagram on that. Other than that, just subscribe and like and share and do all that stuff. We appreciate it, man. And Brandon, just thank you for all that you do, all that you've done for lots of people, and for having me on here, man. I really appreciate it. I think we're here to, here in this 3-dimensional reality together, we're sharing space, and all of it really is, the meaning of life is just to learn the secrets of compassion and to harmonize the higher and lower selves. And that's the work that you're doing. So thank you for it, man.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. And, I feel you so much on like, oh, wow, what's going to happen next? I mean, as I said earlier, doing retreats when people aren't allowed to travel isn't the ideal thing. And that's what we've been doing here, since, 9 months now, retreat week after retreat week here at the Mystic Manor. And so one of the things we're doing to shift, same thing on Patreon, is, there's about 15 of us here at the Mystic Manor, and everyone is a facilitator of some kind. So we've decided to go to, if you go to our Patreon, you can see, and you can find links to that on optimistic.tv. But we've done basically online, Mystic Manor online retreat and play shops re-membership program. And so we're doing different play shops twice a day, 7 days a week. So there's
I love it.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. There's so many of us here that have different things to offer and facilitate. And so we've just started that in the last week or so. And what is that? That's a pivot based off what's happening in the world, right? And you're
dancing with it all, brother.
Dancing with it all, man. So any of you guys who want to experience that, and for a while we're going to offer all of it for free just to give people exposure to it, and then we'll switch it over. But you can check that out. If you go to optimistic.tv and link to our Patreon from there. But it's been quite the journey, and just our job is just to respond with curiosity and wonder and openness, and knowing that good things can come from challenging situations, and it's not if but when, and that's the dance, man. And it has been cool to dance with you, my friend. I would like to ask you the final question I always ask whenever I do a soul share like this, and the question is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Adam Nix?
Well, the meaning of life is to learn the secrets of compassion and to harmonize the higher and lower selves.
Yes. Love it, love it, love it. You are doing
love all, serve all, and create no sorrow.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Thank you, Adam, for co-creating this. All of you out there listening, it has been quite the journey. And of course, I have talked a lot about Optimistic, but if the podcast is 5 days a week, and that's Positive Head. You can find that anywhere there's podcast, or positivehead.com. But thank you guys all for tuning in. Thank you, Adam, for co-creating, my friend. This has been epic. I look forward to seeing you in 3D sooner than later, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll do it as soon as this stuff is over, man. First thing I'm doing is heading back to LA to come hook up with you, and we'll go out and have a good time. So, just want to throw a blessing. I want to throw a blessing out there at everybody. May the light be upon you. May peace be within you. May you be a sun on the paths of all men. thank you guys for joining us, and I look forward to joining you again soon.
Beautifully said. Journey well, everyone. And if you're feeling the call to come for a week retreat style Mystic Manor immersion, remember to go now and book your time to speak with me directly about stepping into the optimistic vortex at calendly.com/talk with Brandon while there are still spots left. Otherwise, I look forward to co-creating magic with you at the Mystic Manor.